How is it going, everybody? Today I have 3 decks, 1 video, and you decide what we are gonna play. So let's go.
I see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad, oh baby's hella bad. After her there ain't no coming back. Wanna take a run at that. I think she's feeling me, turn it up a few degrees. My imagination of her body gets the best of me. Oh gosh, she's such a tease, bitten lips, bruised knees. I'm addicted to her, need her touching me, cause she got a bad little waist. And we tearing down this place, off the liquor that we chase. Casamigos to the face, baby, I don't need no space. Coming closer for a taste, and I'll show you how I make everything just fade away. Cause she's like sex, drugs, cocaine, body so insane. Jealous of the clothing that she wears up on that tight frame. All game, no shame, baby came here to play. I feel like an addict cause she's sex, drugs, cocaine.
And we are gonna check out 3 different Esper builds. Esper because Esper is super popular, especially now when the new meta evolves around midrange, and I think Esper is one of the best decks out there. And also Paulo Vito Dama de Rosa, our ex-world champion, also said that Esper is currently in a really good state in Standard, and I think there is a special thing to know about it. Esper is a really good deck in a best of 3 environment. In a best of 1 environment, it's always really difficult to play, and every decision counts really high. So if you are an average player, let's say a dad or a mom coming home, just wanna chill after a long day and play some games, Esper is maybe not something for you. But if you are a dedicated or maybe a little bit more competitive player, Esper definitely can be really powerful. And here we have 3 different Esper builds. We're gonna go through all of them in this video, and then you down in the comments can decide which deck we should play on the weekend, and I will prepare a video for Sunday, most likely latest Monday, where you can see the deck that the most people voted for. Of course, if you want to test out the decks for yourself, I will leave all the decks in the video description down below, so you can check it out for yourself and see what fits your playstyle a little bit more. So 3 types is aggro, midrange and control. This is why let's go and check all of them out. And our first build is of course our aggro build, and this is a super interesting list because this is basically a Azorius aggro list, combining stuffs from new Capenna that will allow us, by splashing black, to utilize some really powerful spells or creature in this case to finish out the games really fast and really early. So let's check it out and what it does. I mean, you see the shell is already more in mono white scene, and it's similar to Naya humans, where the main deck is almost everything white except the top end. The top end changes here a little bit. In Esper we have a little bit of each color in the curve, but of course the core of it is mono white, this powerful structure of mono white. And this deck is super fun. I played with all of the decks, and this aggro list is really cool to play. So let's start off with Hopeful Initiate and Usher of the Fallen. They are amazing synergies between to each other, but as soon as we drop in our new inclusion from New Capenna, the Refine Shims here, these cards make these 2 just much more explosive and much more amazing, because not only they become bigger, but also you can cycle the cards, so you draw cards, discard cards through the Connive ability, and the creature grows, and you can fit it into your curve. So let's say you want a really aggressive curve, you can keep some smaller creatures or some stuff that make your curve more aggressive. For example, what you play on turn 4. But if you want to go a little bit more mid-range because opponent is a hard removal spell, or you expect a sweeper, we can search for things like Wandering Emperor, or maybe our Lisa that we're gonna talk about it a little bit later more. Then of course a little bit interaction, not too much, but a little bit we have with Portable Hole and Fading Hope, 2 of each, just because we need some sort of removal or something to slow down our opponent, especially because there are decks out there that can kill you on turn 4, turn 5. We need to interact with it, and somehow this is why we have these 2 included here. Then we are now gonna go in our 2-drop slot, and here you see maybe already the super powerful cards with our Luminach, Respiron and Talia, of course. Talia is a love-hate, I think, for the most players. Also in our deck is a little bit sometimes bring our Wandering Emperor a little bit out of curve, because then we need to pay also 1 more. But more often than not, it slows down the opponent so much, or take out a removal that they necessarily need maybe for our turn 3. So this is why Talia made it into the deck. Then Various Stance, again a really versatile spell here, because sometimes we need to kill something to not die to it. but sometimes we can also protect our creatures to just being more annoying. And this annoyance become really difficult to deal with, especially if we have Lisa on the board. Because don't forget, Lisa is still in standard, and what she does is, who doesn't know, is a 5 mana 4/5 lifelinker, and lifelink is here, it really plays a really big role because often she can save you the game because of the lifelink. And she says whenever another non-token creature you control will die, return that creature to its owner's hand at the beginning of the end step. So if opponent casts a sweeper and creatures will die this way, if Lisa is on the board, Lisa will die, but everything else goes back to our board and we can easily rebuild after that, right? So this is something I think really powerful in this meta, where Midhook Massacres, Doomskars, depopulate, and all these sweepers on turn 4, turn 5 coming into the play. Lisa is here, a really nice tool. Then another really cool tool, 2 of the Spectral Adversary, 2 mana flash creature, and we can pay an additional 2 to phase something out. So we can protect our creatures with it, or protect our stuff with it, or maybe allow us to phase out an opponent's creature, especially in mirror matchup, really nice. If we phase out opponent's Refine, or maybe some opponent's Flyer, or some Angels, for example, and then can go in for the final damage, is really cool tool. This is why only 2 off, you don't necessarily want to curve out with it, so playing on turn 2, but also possible if we have, let's say, turn 1, Hopeful Initiate, turn 2, Spectral Adversary that can also grow our Hopeful Initiate, and then suddenly turn 3, Refine, where we go instantly with 2 creatures, can connive 2 times. So again, card selection and grow something. Usually we grow Adversary, of course. Then the other 3 drops, I don't think I need to explain it too much. Brutal Catar, amazing removal, and Delete a Spellbinder can slow down, especially this mono white and these Rakdos builds that utilize Invoke Despair a lot, slow down them critically to the point where we just win the game before they can cast their important spells. Then Wandering Emperor, already set in tempo matchups, but also for control, as a really amazing tool. Worst case scenario, an exile spell for 4 mana and you gain 2 life. In best case scenario, creature creation almost every turn and grows your creature again. That can also be crucial for our Hopeful Initiate sometimes. And then the mana base, I try to keep it really simple, really Azorius-like. You see, maybe we have both of the basic Azorius lands, and then we have some dual lands that help us cast also our black spell, and the only black spells, or the only 2 black spells, is here Refine and our Lisa, of course. This is why we don't have basics of black, but we have dual Sanctum and the pathways to help us cast this 1 black mana. For the mana base and for the deck in general, this is 23 lands and an average of 2.5, so really smooth. Looks a little bit more like mid-rangey, but this deck is a really explosive deck and can go really fast, especially if you have Refine on curve. And this makes it just amazing. Emeria's Call 2 off. I first was hesitating, but sometimes this card is really powerful, especially in these matchups where you can reach the requirements of 7 mana. We usually look to lock out the game or close the game at turn 5, turn 6, but sometimes it can go a little bit longer if opponent is, for example, another Esper midrange that we're gonna look shortly into. They have a lot of interaction, a lot of removal, and this can lead to it that we are maybe going to turn 6, turn 7 where we close the game, right? So this is why 2 Emeria's Call is a really nice addition. This is so far for the aggro deck. Let's go and check out the midrange. And here it is, the beauty of the midrange. Most common used list, I just adapted this list a little bit to my likings and how I think it performs a little bit stronger, a little bit better. But this is basically what also a lot of pro player run or similar lists. And let's check out some inclusions, and I'm gonna talk about some stuff a little bit more, a little bit less, but I think you will see this list a lot in casual play, but also in the ranking up process when you're going through, because it's almost the same, almost. The changes that I made that I found really interesting and cool in this mid-range edition is a one-time array of Femland, especially for best of 1. You more often than not meet somebody who has some sort of white creatures. And in worst case scenario, it's a -4/-1 on instant speed, so it can save your life, but also maybe make an unfavorable block really favorable, because you can give this creature -1 and let's say power almost 0, and then can block it effectively with, let's say, Underdog. Like, I'm talking about matchups against Adeline, right? Adeline has 4 toughness. Okay, Array of Emblem would hit Adeline anyway, but what else do we have that we cannot hit, that we want maybe favorable blocking? spontaneously I don't have anything in my head, but you see what I mean, right? If you give something -4, -1, so it's suddenly maybe only 3 toughness and 0 power, we can efficiently block it with our underdog, for example, and kill it. Otherwise, without it, we will not be able, or we will be able to jump block it, but not kill it and not interact in any sort of other way. Otherwise, everything that contains wine, also refine in mirror matchup, this card is amazing. The best, the cleanest answer to refine is definitely rain, because is also white and it has a 4 toughness. So we play it for 1, pay ward 1, so it's all 2 mana just, and then remove this creature on instant speed. Just amazing addition. Much of Orderly Wardly, I already talked about this card, a really good addition in general in all midrange or controlish type of builds, and this helps us to deal not only with runes and enchantments, but also another aggro decks, or maybe even the decks that has a win condition tokens. For example, Celestia tokens, they have Ren and 7 and Chariot where they try to interact, and here just for 1 mana we can remove all sort of tokens. Then Lore Wallhound, my inclusion. I like this card in mid-range builds because not only it provides you an additional land drop, this is why we have here a little bit basic lands, because when it enters the battlefield and your opponent has more mana than you or more lands than you, you can search your library for a basic plane and then put it on the battlefield tapped. So you accelerate yourself or negate the downside of being on the draw maybe with the Loyal Warhound, but also because it has Vigilance. I found with Refined the best thing that works together is Vigilant Creature, and also here you see maybe Elspeth, I usually go for plus Vigilance first, because from there on, because soft high toughness are available to us, Midhook Massacre is not a big deal. Also things like Redain can get really big with Vigilant, and this is just really powerful tool. I think Vigilance is a really undervalued mechanic from MTG, and here in this deck you will definitely see something that performs on a really high level with Vigilant. Then Luminach Aspire, don't need to talk about. Underdog, I talked already about this card. I will not put 3 or 4 of them, maybe 3, maximum 3, but I'm really fine with 2 of them. Will also not put 4 of them, because it gives you always something to do in the late game. Also in the early game it's a good aggressive blocker, but also attacker if opponent do not remove it, and just a great tool. And here we have our removal that I talked in our aggro deck, because often opponent draws them and some lists run even 4 of them, 4 Vanishing Verse for example. This is our tools here to interact with opponents, so not only amazing 1-drops or 1 instant sorcery, instant spell interaction, but also here on 2-drop we have Vanishing Verse, amazing versatile removal, and 2 of Midhook Massacre, because sometimes something or things needs to die a lot. This is why Midhook Massacre is really good here. Then let's go to our 3-drops, and there is where the whole action happens. And I think in this current standard, the turn 3 is the most decisive turn in the whole game. So if you have an explosive and a good turn 3 like we have it here, then you're most likely gonna win the game. And this is where we have our Redain, who slows down everything. Then we have Kaito for card draw, card advantage, and also unblockable creatures that work really nice with Refine. And then just 1 of Charm of Obscura, because it's a really versatile spell that can bring you really cool stuff from the graveyard, because what it does, it has 3 different modes and we choose 1 of it for instant speed. Return a target multicolor permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So we can return Kaito, we can return Refine if we need to, but this is not only what the charm does. Rarely I did this really, but the most part is it's a counter spell where you can counter instant or sorcery speed, but also it can destroy creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. And remember how much creature and planeswalker that are impactful in the meta we have currently with mana value 3 or less. Obnixes and Kaitos, right? So this is definitely a really cool inclusion. One of, because sometimes we need to go this extra step. Usually in the mid to late game, this is a really helpful tool. And Refine, I don't need to talk about it. Refine is just great in this matchup. But what I want to talk a little bit about more is our 4-drops, because all our 4-drops, and we have 2 of them or 6 together, Obscura and Wanderer are flash creatures, and it makes a hell of a difficult for an opponent to play around something of it, especially if it's an experienced opponent and he knows, okay, you have 4 untapped mana, something will come. Will it be a Wanderer or will it be an Obscura? And because they have so high contrast between each other, the one is exiling, killing, providing a bigger board or stronger board, and the other one is providing us a stronger board, but then it's like a counter bounce spell of a spell. So basically the turn 4 for my opponent, let's say a dead turn, because we can bounce something back and instantly provide something on the board that can go in, gain us life, and damage our opponent. This is why these two are amazing, and you see it in the most common lists because it's so difficult to play around, right? Like, what do? Do you hold your main creature back? Do you bait the Wanderer? If you bait the Wanderer, do you play in the end step something like Lolth? Maybe Lolth will get countered. Or do you play, I don't know, Big Score or Unexpected Windfall? Will you discard a card and then suddenly it gets bounced back and then you are punished because you played it on the main phase, right? So there is really difficult to play around these two, and this is why they made it to the deck, definitely. Then let's put you back here. Elspeth. Elspeth again, amazing tool to find our 3-drops, but also our 2-drops are really impactful, but also it can plus and give us the necessary vigilance that I was talking about before, and making, for example, Refine almost impossible to kill through another Esper player, because usually what another Esper player play is Vanishing Verse and stuff like Midhook, right? Refine cannot be hidden by a Vanishing Verse because it's a multicolored creature, and Midhook needs to go for, after turn 5, it needs to go maybe like for -7 to hit Refine. And this is almost impossible. Like -7 on turn 5, you know how much treasure you need to ramp to 9 mana to play Midhook for -7, so it's almost impossible. And also here I have one inclusion of Emeria's Call because why not? We don't need so many basics. We have here 4 basic lands to play around. This is why we have this inclusion here of Emeria's Call. And mana bases in general be a little bit difficult because one problem I have is I have only one of these Dimir pathways. You see, maybe this is why it make appearance as a one-off everywhere, but I have all 4 of Marches because usually the blue mana that we start needing, the blue mana is here, turn 3, right? And this is why March is a great inclusion because it's come untapped on turn 3. So let's check out surely the mana base. We have 24 lands, of course. For our midrange at least we need 24 lands. With our dual land we have 25, and we have an average of 2.8. So you see the midrange here is in a perfect spot compared to the aggro aggro deck that I showed you. It was 2.5. Also maybe a little bit too high for an aggro, like 2 to 2.3, 2.4 is a good an aggro deck. But the other aggro deck definitely utilizes really powerful 2-drops and also really powerful 4-drops. This is why the curve is there a little bit higher, but here super smooth mid-range deck. So let me know and down if you wanna see this deck being played. And now, of course, the last deck is our Esper Control, and this is something totally different than you maybe expect or a lot of people expect, because this is more a traditional control deck that has some win conditions, but of course one of the main conditions is our Hullbreaker Horror. This is why it's here definitely, but also we have some small and tiny additions, for example our Planeswalkers that can also be a win condition. And this deck, I played some games with it, and the thing is, this is a really traditional control deck, so this is nothing that utilizes a lot of creatures, this is nothing that utilizes a lot of, let's say, different stuff. What we are doing is we're removing opponent's creatures, we counter opponent's spells, and we are in the same time trying to commit to the board to put up the pressure there, right? This is why let's go check out what it surely does. And you see also, let's check first maybe the curve. The curve is 3.4. This is why we run also 25 lands on the normal, and we have also double-sided lands, for example 4 of Javari Disruption and 1 of Emeria's Call. So this altogether make it 30 lands that we should hit, or we can hit, so we definitely should not miss out on a land drop, because we need a lot of mana in the late game for our Hullbreaker Horror. So let's check out the deck and what it should do, or how it performs, or what it does. So the first, of course, Orderly Ward. Layout Told in mid-range and also in control matchups, this is a great card to just interact with opponents' planeswalkers or creatures. Then we have Sunset Rivalry, 3 off, because often if opponent goes white or opponent goes too fast, I want Sunset Rivalry to slow these things a little bit down and provide me the extra advantage not only in the cards, but only maybe in life, but also maybe on the board, that we have some creature, and especially really useful against Rakdos and Giant Sacrifices when they, I don't know, play like Epicure, damage me for once, have a creature on the board, and then on our turn 2 we play, and then maybe they have also more cards in their hand, and then on our turn we draw our Sunset Rivalry, we play our Sunset Rivalry, have 2 creatures, gain 3 life, and maybe even draw a card. So this is the perfect scenario, of course, but in the most other cases, it's just an early on, let's say, stabilizer that give us a little bit more turns to find out the right solutions, the right answers for the current situation of the deck or of the game. If it's like a sweeper, do we need a counter spell because we know like Showdown the Scout or something else is incoming. So this is what actually the Sunset Rivalry does in this deck. Then 4 of Jawari Disruption. I know it's an amazing card, but can also act as a land drop on turn 1, for example, but also on turn 2, counter something, disrupt opponent's curve. Really powerful. 1 of Test of Talents, because sometimes we need to get rid of this Invoke Despairs or all this other Invoke stuff or this reanimation stuff that we have currently running, and this is why Test of Talent is a really cool card. I first tried to run a little bit more of them, like 2 or 3, but then I found myself sometimes stuck, especially against runes or enchantments, where I have no targets for it. This is why I cut it down to 1. Then Vanishing Verse, 3 off, because great removal, especially against another Esper decks. Vading Announcement can be hit, maybe Refine cannot be hit and Kaito cannot be hit, is a little bit downside, but this is why we have here Wardley for Refined, and Kaito can be killed with our Soul Shatter. Just 1 off, because I like the inclusion against dragons, I like the inclusions against other Planeswalkers decks like Kaitos, for example. Then saw it coming, 2 off, Counterspell, what should I say? Void Rent, similar to Vanishing Verse, but cannot be countered and can destroy anything, right? So 3 mana, destroy whatever you want, except a non-land or except a land, and yeah, just a great removal spell, cannot be countered, so against another counter decks or another control decks is really powerful. 1 of Senestus, but this card does so much job, so much work for this deck, it's unbelievable, especially if you can drop it on curve. Then you can suddenly play your Hullbreaker maybe a little bit early, but also it fixes our mana for all of this dual white, dual black, as we see here. Then we have 1 of Memory Deluge. I don't know, I'm not a big fan of Memory Deluge, but I found myself sometimes useful to have another card draw option than our Planeswalker, because you see maybe our card draw is covered with Kaito, card draw is covered with Sorin. Right, so this is where we mainly get our card advantage in other matchups, because the rest is pure answers. We have also a little bit card draw with Sunset Rivalry, but as I said, the Planeswalker are the main draw source here. Obscura is a card selection source, so we can discard something we don't need and draw something maybe that we like more, and through this Obscura gets also bigger. But also 1 of Edgar, I found this inclusion really cool, because Edgar is really difficult to interact, because he cannot be hit by Vanishing Verse, so he needs to be exiled in a way that is not common in the current meta. This is why I have Edgar in, and he can take over games. Then we have, of course, interactions or sweepers with our Doomskars, with our Depopulate, and our Farewell. Those are basically resets for our deck if we need some sort of reset. After, I don't know, usually I like to save my Vanishing Verse to see what my opponent is playing. If I see that my opponent is mono-white aggro, of course I'm using Vanishing Verse, but if I see that my opponent is some sort of Gruul midrange or some Esper midrange, I try to keep my Vanishing Verses and stuff a little bit back, get them maybe the value of Vading Announcement and stuff, and then sweep everything and then see where we go from there, because Vanishing Verse can also interact later in the game with the Vading Announcement if opponent plays things like Loath, and suddenly the spiders get menace and get bigger and stuff like this, right? Yeah, and then, as I said, win condition, Hullbreaker Horror, what should I say more? The most our spells and the most our interaction is insta speed, so we can do it on opponent's turn. This is where Hullbreaker Horror shines the most, locking out the game, don't let opponent do anything, and then hit for really much damage. For the mana base, you see maybe I don't have this creature manland from blue. Simple reason, because I don't have it. If you have the creature manland, add it definitely. I went with 2 of Cave of the Frost Dragon, because it has similar effects, let's say, but just maybe a little bit earlier. a little bit less mana can be spent, and you can pump it with our Wandering Emperor. And it's really helpful against angels, because if angels try to go over the top, it's a flying creature, so Cave of the Frost Dragon can effectively block the angels, especially if you give them a counter with Wandering Emperor. It's a 4/5 creature that blocks effectively all the angels. Yeah, for the mana base, I talked already, we have 30 lands, so you should definitely hit your land drops. And this deck is really interesting in traditional control deck, let's say, right? So on this note, guys, let me know down in the comments what you would like to see me playing. As I said, the most votes, people who vote for the most archetype, let's say, will be played on the weekend, and then I will upload the video with the gameplay most likely Sunday or latest on Monday. You will see it performing if you're interested. Otherwise, as I said, if you're interested yourself to play something, or maybe you got inspired through something, down in the description you can check the link for each deck and pick for yourself what would you like to play, and then maybe vote it for also for it. Then I will be playing, and maybe you see some different interactions in it. Otherwise, guys, thank you for your time, thank you for watching, and don't forget to vote. Ciao!